Okay, class. So in this tutorial, we're going to go over some compound objects. So if you go to your Create tab under Geometry, I'm going to scroll down to Compound Objects right here. Now there's a few options you can use in here. We're just going to go over the major ones. We're not going to go over Measure. We're not going to go over Terrain. But we are going to go over the majority of these. Now, when you first go to this drop down, you can see that only Block Mesh and Measure are selectable. It's because you don't need other objects selected first before you actually make these. So we're going to go over Morph first. So to illustrate this, I'm just going to make a sphere right in the center. I'm going to Alt W to maximize my viewport. Now with this sphere, I want to morph it into two other shapes. So I'm going to make three objects out of this. I'm just going to move this over here. And I'm going to shift drag on the X direction, let go. I'm going to make two copies. Like so. And what I want to do is I want to immediately turn these into editable poly so that I can change the way these look. So you right click, go to convert to editable poly. That's first way. Or you can be on the modifier tab, right click in the negative space here, convert to editable poly. Do the same for this, editable poly. Now I'm going to turn on edge faces by hitting F4 on the keyboard so I can actually see what my geometry looks like, my segments. So this is going to be my starting point here. And I want to change this shape here. So I'm going to go into vertex mode. I'm going to grab vertices right here. I'm just going to pull these up on the z-axis and scale them down a little bit just so we have sort of a different shape. I'm going to take this edge loop here and just kind of bring it up a little bit and bring it in. So something like a different shape. I'm going to take this shape, select everything at the top, and scale it down on the y-axis to flatten the top, like so. So now I have three completely different shapes. So with the first shape selected, I'm going to go to Compound Objects. I'm going to go to Morph. And the first option is Pick Target. Now before I pick Target, the first thing I want to do is move my timeline out a little bit. Make sure it's not on frame 0. Pick Target, pick the second object. Now you'll notice that it changes the shape to this object. And it also puts keyframes down here at the bottom on the timeline. So what it's doing is it's animating in between these to change the shape. Next I go to frame 60, pick target again, click on third object. Now the third object is in there. So now it's going to morph in between these shapes. So this is the morpher modifier. Well, this is the morph command. It actually is a morph modifier that sort of does the same thing. And I will show you that. So if I undo this a few times to get out of that, so now I don't have my morph applied to this anymore. I'm going to show you what the morpher modifier does. So instead of using compound objects, I'm going to go to the modifier stack. And I need to get rid of this morph here. So I'm just going to convert it back to editable poly. Go down to the modifier list, and I'm looking for morpher. So now with morpher, you have this little list here where you can input different morph targets. Everywhere it says empty, you can import a morph target. So I'm just going to do pick from scene, pick object from scene, and pick this object. So now it says sphere 002. I'm going to click on this, pick object, pick this sphere right here. So now we have both of these targets loaded in. So now I can animate this on my own, on the fly. So if I change this slider here, now I can morph the target manually. I can morph this manually. And if I want to animate it, I can just throw down auto key, go to frame 30, make this 100%, go to frame 60, change this to 0, make this 100. So now you get the same exact effect as using the morph command. So this is the morpher modifier. So the morpher modifier is a manual way of doing it. The morph command on compound objects is an automatic way of doing this if you want to morph in between targets. So that's morph. Next up, let's check out scatter. So I'm going to delete everything on my stage, turn off auto key, and I want to load up a scene that I already have. And to do that, I need to have my other drive connected. Alright, so I just connected my flash drive. Now, actually find that location. Unit 4, scatter example. Okay, so this is a little flower animation that I made. And to make this animation, I'll show you what I did. Open the manage layers here. Now, this cherry blossom that I made actually has a rig attached to it. So if I hide this and unhide where the rig is, this is what's controlling the opening and closing of that flower. I actually have a bone rig that's actually controlling the flower. So if I turn on both of these, you can actually see it. You see the bone rig and it's controlling this. Now I actually have some secondary animation on this as well. So let's take a look at this. So the first modifier is skin. And basically what skin does is it attaches these points to all of the bones here. So if I were to go in here and click on one of these bones here, you'll see it gives me a fall off between red and blue. Red means it's 100% affected, blue means it's mildly affected, and gray means it's not affected at all. So it's like a graduation between the two. It's a gradient. So the skin modifier is used to link to skin objects to bones. The next modifier I have is a poly select. And this right here it gives it a soft selection fall off. So what that means is 100% is red, blue is less, about 1%, and this is 100%. And what this does is it tells the modifier above it how to control it. So now I have this flex modifier here. and it's adding some secondary movement to it. So it's making the flower kind of sway and jiggle a little bit. So that's what flex does. And the modifier above this is called a point cache. And what point cache does is it takes all the information that is currently below it and it bakes it out to a separate file. So I no longer need the animation inside the scene anymore. So now I can just recall this animation whenever I want, and it's saved out to a file right here. So you'll see it says cherryblossom.pc2. This is saved out to a file, the entire animation of this flower. So now let's take a look at the tree. The tree is where I use the scatter command. So I'm going to take one of these cherry blossoms, and I'm just going to duplicate this. Cherry blossom 002. It's fine. And I want to use the scatter command to put this across this tree. So I'm going to go to compound objects. I'm going to go to scatter with the flower still selected. I'm going to go pick distribution object, and I want to pick this tree. So now what it did was it made a copy of the tree, but I don't want to see this copy here, so I'm going to go to display, and I'm going to hide distribution object. And now you can see my flower is attached to the base of this tree here. And I can keep making duplicates. If I change this number here, it's going to spread it all around the tree. So let's get something crazy like 220. Now also, since I have this animated, if I scrub the timeline, you'll see that all of this is going to play the animation and it'll bloom on top of the tree. So this is what scatter is used for. And you can change the way your objects are distributed. Right now I have it on even, but I'm going to put it on random. So it randomizes it a little bit. You have different options in here. Depending on which one you select, it's going to give you a completely different result. Now I put it on all vertices here. So now it's going to take a little time to think about it. And it's probably going to crash my 3ds Max because this tree has a lot of vertices attached to it. Wow. See, yeah, this is what happens when you tell it to use all vertices. So it's going to put a flower on every single vertex point on this tree. So now it's just heavily populated. So you do want to kind of be careful when you're doing this because this could result in slowdown or a crash. So I'm going to put this back on random faces. Let's see that again. It has the animation attached to it. So this is the scatter command. And if you scroll down a little bit, you have a little bit of transformation information here. And above here, you have the base scale amount. Let's say these flowers are a little bit too big on this tree, and I want to decrease the size, let's say 50%. So now they're actually smaller. So it takes the original size of this flower that I duplicated from, and it cuts it in half by whatever this percentage is. Now, when using scatter, generally you want to always make your objects perpendicular to the surface. So what that basically means is if I zoom into this flower here, the stem where the flower is coming from, let's see. Okay, you see this stem right here? This stem is where the object is coming from. It's going to be perpendicular to this surface here. So it's going to be on top of this surface sticking outward. So you always want to have perpendicular check, because if I don't check that, now look how it is. It's laying across the surface and it's going the wrong direction. It's like somebody glued the flower to the tree, and that's not ideal. That's not what you want. So perpendicular. So to show you this, I actually have a little video that I made, just a little animation of the tree. See if I can find it. Yes, so if we go to my website, which is on DeviantArt, I actually have a little animation of the tree. So I have multiple scatters going across the tree, and I have it blooming on different instances. So I have maybe about 4 to 5 different instances of the cherry blossoms, and I have it blooming like every 20 seconds, every 10 seconds. So it's like it blooms back to back to back to back. And here's another test of just the cherry blossoms. So basically what I did was I took all of these and I scattered it across this tree here. Alright, so let's go to the next command. I'm going to reset my scene, not save it. So next up we have conform. So what conform does is it's going to take the shape of one object and conform it to another. Let's say I make a box. Now I'm going to make this a cube, so it's going to be an even number. So 100 by 100 by 100. And I'm going to make a sphere. Make this a radius of about 80. Now I want to make sure my sphere is centered on my cube here. But I want to make sure my cube is actually centered in the viewport. Now if I look down at my coordinate system down here, I'll see that my X position and my Y position is not centered. I need this to be 0, 0, 0. So I'm going to right click on the spinner here. It's going to snap to 0. Right click on the spinner here. It's going to snap to 0. Now I could do that with the sphere as well, but what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to press Alt A to enable my align tool, and I'm going to click on the box, and I want to align it to the center of this box. So I want the X position, the Y position, the Z position to be center, center. So now it centers on this box. It's going to tell it OK. So with the sphere still selected, I'm going to go to my Create tab on Geometry. I'm going to go to the drop down Compound Objects. I'm going to go to Conform. I'm going to pick Wrap to Object. And I'm going to select the box. And it doesn't really look like it did anything. So I'm just going to move this out a little bit just so you can see. I'm going to go to Modify. I'm going to recalculate projection. It works a little bit better. And I wanted to align this along vertex normals. So now you can see that this sphere here actually turned into a box. So that's what conform does. Haven't really found a daily use for this, but just showing you that it's there. Reset the scene again. Next modifier. So next up we have connect. And connect is pretty cool. Let's show you what that does. So to illustrate this, I'm going to go to standard primitives. I'm going to make a torus, which is basically a donut. And I'm also going to make a sphere. Now again, I want to make sure my objects are aligned properly. I'm just going to change the color of this because I don't like that bright color. It's hard to see the underlying geometry. So now I can see my segments better. I like to use a combination of blue, maybe a darker green, just so it's easier to see. So I want to make sure this is zeroed out. So again, I'm going to go to my coordinate system down here, go to right click on the spinners here, 0, right click, 0, right click, 0. I'm going to take my sphere, and I'm going to zero the X and the Y, but I want to keep the Z above it. I'm just going to move it up just a little bit. So what we're going to do with this is we're going to take the faces around here, around this loop, and we're going to delete these. And we're also going to delete the bottom half of this here. So in order to do that, we need to convert both of these objects into an editable poly. So again, right click, convert to editable poly, click on the sphere, right click, in this negative space under the modify tab, editable poly. I'm going to go to polygon mode. I'm going to hit F on my keyboard to go into my front orthographic view. So now I see this straight on. I'm going to select the bottom half of this sphere here using the rectangle selection. So this is this right here, my rectangle selection region. Now you can change this here anytime you want. So if I wanted to make it a spherical selection, now this is not really ideal because I'm trying to select the bottom part of this and it's going to be really hard to do it with the sphere, with the circle selection mode. So I'm going to keep this on a rectangle. I'm going to select the bottom half of this, hit delete. I'm going to go out of sub-object mode. Make sure you click off of this, otherwise you can't click this object. Now I'm going to hit P to go back to perspective mode. I'm going to turn off realistic mode because this is starting to cast a shadow right here. You see this little dark spot is casting a shadow, and I want to see shadows right now. So I'm going to turn on shaded mode to get rid of the shadow. Go to polygon. I'm going to click this polygon here, and I want to loop all the way around. And so in order to do this, I'm going to hold shift, and I'm going to select the polygon that's right next to it, and it's going to do a full loop around. And now I want to select the polygons that are right next to it as well. So I'm going to grow my selection by hitting this grow button. So now it grows the selection. Now I'm just going to hit delete on the keyboard. So now I want to select the sphere again. And no matter how much I click on this, I can't select it because I am still in sub-object mode. So you have to make sure you click off of this first, then you can click on other objects. So now we're going to connect these two here. So it doesn't matter which one you pick first. I'm going to pick the torus first. Going to go to create, geometry, click on the drop down, compound objects, and we're going to use connect, pick operand. Now right now you see we have the torus 001 in our operands because it's the original object we had selected before. So now I'm going to select the sphere here, and now it just kind of bridges the gap. Now make sure you right click in a negative space here to turn off your pick operand because you don't want to keep picking everything. And also you're still in connect mode, so you want to right click again to get out of that. Now go to your modify tab. Now you can change the parameters here. So now we scroll down here under interpolation, we can change the number of segments. And this will change the way the bridge looks. So the way I'm doing this is I click on the spinner and I'm dragging up and down. So again, click on the spinner, drag up and down. Instead of just holding down on just one button, it's going to go slower this way. Now you can do it this way. That's fine. And also you have the tension where you can change the tension of it. So depending on which direction you go, you're going to get a different shape. So that's a cool effect. Now, the cool thing about this is because these objects are still in object mode and not sub-object mode, I can go back and change the parameters of these. So let's say I want to go back and change the way the sphere looks. So if I go to connect, go to operands, I can move the sphere around. And if I go to editable poly, let's say I click on the sphere and I go to element mode, I can actually scale this up and down. So I can scale this and get a different result. Get out of edit poly, go back to operands, click select sphere, and I'm just going to move this up. So make my sphere a little bit bigger, and then I can kind of squash and stretch this. So also you can animate this. So let's say turn on auto key, go to frame 30. I'm just going to pull this up. Going to change the tension. Go to frame 60. Change the tension back. Increase the segments. Go to frame 80. Bring it back down. So I'm going to turn off edge faces by hitting F4. So now if I play this animation back by hitting the play button, I'm going to go back to the start. So go to start. I'm just going to play the animation. So now you're getting a cool animation out of this. Now you'll notice here that these faces here are a little faceted. They're not smooth. So I want to smooth these faces here. So there's some smoothing options right here. So for smoothing, I want the bridge of this where these faces meet, where these extra geometry we made, I want that to smooth out. So I'm going to click on bridge. You see that smooths out right there. And I'm going to click on ends, and now that little line right there is gone. So now the object is completely smooth. So that is Connect. Pretty cool. I'm going to reset this again, go to the next one. Not going to save it. Reset, yes. So next on the list, we have Blob Mesh. Blob Mesh is pretty cool. Let's see what this does. So I'm going to click here, and I'm just going to click right in the center here, and it's going to drop a little blob object onto my viewport. Then I'll right click to end it, because I don't want this selected in blue anymore. Now I need some objects to blob on top of. So I'm going to maximize my viewport with Alt W, and I'm going to make two objects. I'm going to make a box. Now this is important. I want to have my length, width, and height segments on 1, 1, and 1. I'm going to change the box to a different color so it's a little bit easier to see. I'm going to make sure I have edge faces on, so I'm going to hit F4. Now I want to duplicate this box. So I'm going to hold shift and drag out on the x-axis. Put it over here, let go. Make sure it's a copy. Hit OK. And I want to add more segments on this box. So I'm going to change this to 5, 5, and 5. So now with the blob mesh selected, make sure you go on Modify tab, I am going to start picking the objects to blob onto. So in this little dialog here, I'm going to hit Pick. I'm going to pick the first object, and now what it does is it snaps these little blob objects to each vertex. If I pick this object, it puts it on each vertex. Now notice the difference here. This is going by the number of vertices that are currently on the object. Because I have a dense amount of segments on this object, the whole thing kind of blob together. So if I'm selected on my blob mesh here, we go and change the size, you can actually see this. If I scale this down to a smaller size, now you can see that you have a blob object on each vertex. And when you scale it up and they start to touch each other, they kind of conform and they kind of blob into one object. So this is a cool way to kind of make kind of like a gacky, viscous substance. Now if I keep increasing this value here, eventually they're going to merge together. See here? Now this is kind of merging together and going over top of all the objects. So this is a cool way to make some, maybe some slime just kind of overtaking an object. So that's the size. You can always play with the tension. I usually leave the tension on 1 because it gives you a smoother result. Now you have your elevation coerciveness here. You have your render value, and then you have your viewport value. Viewport is what you see right now. Your render is how it's going to look when you hit the render button here. So let's go play with viewport. Now the more you increase this value, the less dense the geometry will become. Then eventually it's going to go away on certain vertices. And then the lower you make this value, it's going to increase the geometry exponentially, and it's going to get really, really dense until this whole thing just becomes a big white blob. Now, you don't want to go below 2 or 1, because if you go too low, it's going to freeze your computer, because it's going to have to calculate a lot of points. So let's leave it on something like reasonable, like 4. And I click on Use Soft Selection. And now this kind of takes over for where the size actually did. So now I can block the objects together. So you have your large data optimization. Right now you're not really going to see this. You can turn it off in the viewport. So this is pretty much blob mesh. Now of course I can go and take the box here. If I select the box and I can move it around, and you'll see that it'll blob into this as I come closer. So this is a cool thing that you can kind of animate. So that's blob mesh. I'll reset viewport again. So next up we're going to skip shape merge because that's very not useful. We're going to go straight to Boolean. Now your Boolean operation, this is the bread and butter. So I'm going to make some standard primitives here. Make a really tall box here. Alt W to maximize viewport. And I'm just going to center this up a little bit on the X and the Y. I'm going to make a cylinder, and I'm going to turn on auto grid here so I can draw on top of this. Because what I want to do is I want to draw on this surface, and I want to put this cylinder straight through. So I'm just going to pull it straight through like so. And I'm going to turn on my edge faces by hitting F4. And I'm just going to change the color just because of my preference. Alright, so the way Boolean works, the object that you want to cut from is what you select first. So since I want to use this cylinder as a cutting object, I'm going to select the box first. So before I do this, I'm going to use the hold and fetch command because I'm going to come back to this operation a lot. So I'm going to go to compound objects, and before I click on Boolean, I'm going to go to edit, and I'm going to go to hold. So now it's going to hold the copy of the scene for me. I'm going to click on Boolean, and I'm going to go to pick operand B. And now what that does is it cuts out that cylinder, and it leaves the shape and the indentation of it. So again, I'm going to right click to end that operation. We'll go to Modify tab. Let's take a look at what it did. Now you have multiple options in here to change the way this is affecting this box here. First thing I want to do is I want to go back and change the way the cylinder looks. So I'm going to click on the plus sign for Boolean, go to operands, and I'm going to pick the cylinder right here, and you'll see it populates right here, cylinder. If I go to cylinder, now I get these parameters back. So now if I want to, I can go back and change these segments in here. So I'm going to zero this out so all these segments go away. And I can change the side segments here. So now it kind of changes the way this cut shape is. So it gives you an alternate shape. Pretty cool. I'm going to leave it on something like 18 sides. Oh, not 189, 18. And now what also I can do with this is go back to operands. And now you'll see your little gizmo pops up here. This tells you that you can actually move the object now. So if I want to, I can move this object all around the surface and it'll keep this cut out. So depending on where I land, it's going to give me a different shape. So if I want my cut to be right in the middle here, I can just put it in the middle. So this is a cool way to get a different shape. So it's something like you can make a little tunnel going through a bridge here. That's a cool way you can do that. Alright, so let's go back down to Boolean. And now I'm going to change the operation. Instead of subtracting A from B, I want to do the opposite. I want to subtract B from A. So I'll click on this, and now look what it did. Now it subtracted the box from the cylinder. So it just inverted the operation. And the other option I like is union. Now what this is, this unites the objects into one piece. So now it's all one piece now. And you have intersection. Now intersection is, it's going to take the overlap between the box and the cylinder and make a new shape out of it. So if I go back to the union, you'll see that this little gap here where it overlaps between the cylinder and the box, if I go to intersection, it's going to make a shape out of that. So that's what intersection does. The next option is cut. Now what cut is going to do is it's just going to cut an outline of that shape where it intersects. So now it gives you kind of a visual cue of where that object was. Now if I tell it to split, now it's going to split these two into two separate elements. So when you convert this to an editable poly, this will be one element and this will be one element. The next one is remove inside, and obviously it removes the inside, and now you can see the back faces here. So you can see straight inside this object. The next one is remove outside, which it kind of inverts this and it makes another shape where the intersection was. So that's your Boolean operation. Very useful. So now I'm going to go back and fetch. Yes. And it's going to take me back to where I originally was. And we're going to move on to the next operation, which is ProBoolean. Now, ProBoolean is used to make multiple objects, cut multiple objects. So Boolean, you can only do two objects at a time. ProBoolean, you can do more than two. So since we can do more than two, let's create more objects. Let's make a sphere here. I'm just going to make it right on top of this box. I'm going to kind of center it up on the X and the Y, just so it's kind of centered here. And let's do something a little bit more creative. Let's take this torus here, kind of put it here, could align it on the X, 0. So now this is kind of protruding through right here. That's what I want. So now we have multiple objects here. And I just want to show you the power of the ProBoolean. So again, before I do anything, I'm going to go to compound objects. Before I hit Pro Boolean, I'm going to go to edit. I'm going to hold it. So I'm going to select the box first again because this is the object I want to cut from. I'm going to go to Pro Boolean. Now, this menu is a little bit different than the other one. This one you have some different options here. So the first one is union, which is going to unite the objects. Second one is intersection, which is going to make an intersection between the objects, just like Boolean did. Now you'll notice that in this version of Pro Boolean, you only have one subtraction method. In Boolean, you had two subtraction methods where you can subtract A from B and B from A. Now this subtraction only goes one direction. So that's a major difference between the two. So it is, you have to use the order of operations. You have to select the box first. So the object you want to cut from, you have to select first. So now if I want to select this cylinder here, I go to start picking. I want to pick this. And now let's say for this sphere here, I want to change the operation I want to do. Instead of making a cut here, I want to go to union. And now I want to select this. So now I hit union here, and it's going to change the operation. Select that. So now it's going to unite the top of this, and now this is going to go away. And now what I can do is I can change the operation here. So if I go to merge, I can click merge, and now I can click on this object here, and what it's going to do is it's going to merge the two. Now, union and merge are two different operations. They look the same on the surface, but they are completely different. They do completely different operations. Now I'm going to show you that. So here's all my objects that I put in my Pro Boolean operation. Now, the cool thing about Pro Boolean is if you're not satisfied with an operation, you can go back and change it. So let's say instead of merging this torus here, I can click on this. Right now you see it says merge. Let's say I want to change the operation to subtract. So I go back to subtract, hit change operation, and now it subtracts it instead of merging it. So now it gives you a completely different shape. Let's say I want to go to the cylinder, the sphere here. Right now I use the union. Let's say I want to make a cookie cutter out of this. So instead of making a union, I'm going to use, let's say I'll use union and then I'll use cookie. And I'll change operation. Now look what it did. It completely changed the operations for the other two because now it's going to cut out everything. So it's going to give you some different operations depending on what you have selected. So now I'm going to go to imprint, change operation. Now look what it did. Now it cut out an outline of each of the shape, each shape here. I'm going to turn off that. I'm going to go back to union, change operation. And now you can see I'm back to where I was. So now I'm going to show you the difference between merge, attach, and insert. They all do separate things. So to facilitate this, I'm going to go back to fetch, tell it yes, and I'm going to delete these objects here, and we're only going to focus on these two because I want to show you what the difference is between each of the operations. So Pro Boolean, I'm going to go to merge first. Well, actually, let's go to union. Watch this. Go to union. I'm going to go to start picking and pick this object, and I'm going to immediately convert this to an editable poly. So now if I go to editable poly mode, if I click on element and click on this, you notice that it selects the entire thing because union actually unites the objects together. So now it is one whole piece. So I'm going to go to fetch again. And this time I'm going to fetch before I actually do the Boolean operation. So I'm going to go fetch because I'm hold again because I want to hold it at this position. Go to Boolean. Instead of union, I want to use merge. I'm going to start picking, pick this, convert this to editable poly. Now you can see already a difference between merge and union. You see all these extra segments that added in here. Now watch this. If I go to element mode and I pull this box away, look at this mess that it left behind. So this is a perfect example of why you will probably never want to use merge. It leaves a crazy rat's nest around, and this is very not ideal. So I'm going to fetch again. I'm going to change the operation. And this time I'm going to use attach. Start picking. Pick this object. Convert to editable poly. Go to poly, the element mode. And now let's see what it did. Now these are two separate elements. So if I were to move this out, you notice that it didn't cut anything. There's the same objects. They're still whole. And all it did was attach them into the same sub-element. So now they're sub-elements of each other, but they didn't do a cut. So this is not what we wanted, because I'm going to show you this is the same operation as doing this. So if I were to make another object here, let's make a random cylinder here, and I have this object selected, it is the same as using the attach command. So if I go here and hit attach and pick this object, it's the same operation. All I did was attach it to this sub element. So now I can select each individual piece. So that's not exactly what I wanted here. So now if I go to edit, go to fetch again, go back to this, I'm going to show you the very last one, Pro Boolean, and we're going to use insert instead. Start picking, pick the cylinder, convert this to editable poly, and now I'm going to go to element mode, and I'm going to pull the cylinder away. And now what it did was, it actually did do a Boolean operation. It actually cut out the shape of the cylinder, but it left the cylinder intact. So now you get the original operand, and you get the new piece here where it has it cut out. So that's Pro Boolean. Let's reset this. Not going to save it. So the next one we're going to use is Pro Cutter. Now, this one I didn't get to show in class. So to illustrate this, Pro Cutter, I'm going to make a box, a really tall box. I'm going to hit Alt W, maximize the viewport, and I'm going to change the color to a blue color so I can see it better. I'm going to make sure this is centered up. Now, you'll notice that if you're not selected on a move tool, you're not going to have any information down here. All this is going to be zeroed out. So you have to be selected on the move tool in order to see these values down here. So I'm going to right click, and make sure this is zeroed out, because I just want it center, center, center. And I'm going to take this plane here, and what I want to use this for is a cutting object. So let's make this a different color, like red, just so it's easier to see. And I'm just going to put it straight through this box here. And I'm going to make multiple copies of this. So I'm going to rotate this around. So I'm going to hold shift and rotate this, make a copy. Hold shift, rotate this, make a copy. Hold shift, rotate this, make another copy. So now we're getting some different variation here. Rotate this one more time. There we go. So all of these red planes here I'm going to use as cutting objects. Now, originally, if I go back to compound objects, before when we use a Boolean and a Pro Boolean, you would first select the box because this is what you want to cut from. Pro Cutter works the complete opposite way. For Pro Cutter, you have to select the object you want to start cutting with first. So order of operation applies to this too. So before I do anything, I'm going to go to Hold, and let's see what this does. So we're going to come back to this object, but first we are going to make a box and a cylinder, because I just want to show you what the difference is between the Boolean operations and the Pro Cutter. So the same as what we did before. Gonna hold this. I go to compound objects. So Pro Cutter, I have to select the object I want to cut with first. Pro Cutter. Now when I hit this button right here, you'll see in the bottom the cylinder is designated as a cutter. So now I have to pick the stock object, which is the object I want to cut from. So pick stock objects, pick this object, and now you see it does that Boolean operation. So this is kind of like the opposite of Boolean and Pro Boolean. You have to select the cutting object first. So that's just to be mindful of that. So now you have some different options in here. You have the stock is outside the cutter. You have the stock is inside the cutter. So depending on what you select here, you're going to get some different results. So this is kind of like the opposite of cut. And here, this is kind of like intersection for Pro Boolean. And this is kind of the regular subtraction mode for Boolean. So depending on what you have, you're going to get completely different results. So now I want to show you what the other options in the Pro Cutter does. So if I'm selected on one of these cutters, remember you have to select the cutter object first. And I'm just going to hold this before I do this. And I'm going to use Pro Cutter. And before I do this, I'm going to tell it to auto extract mesh and explode by elements. And you're going to see what this does. And I want to make sure I have both of these selected. And order of operations applies here. First thing you have to do is select all the cutter objects first. So I'm going to pick cutter, pick this, pick that, pick this, pick that. So I have all of my cutter objects selected. Then I'm going to go to pick stock objects. Then I'm going to pick the box. So now let's take a look at what this did. So if I go to my move tool and I move the cutter objects away, look what it did to the box. It cut up the box into many different shapes based on the cutting angle. So now I have multiple pieces cut from this box. So this is what Pro Cutter does. Pretty cool. You have all these little pieces here that you can break apart. Now, what's cool about this, the Pro Cutter, when you have objects you have broken apart like this, you can apply physics to this and you can kind of make it fall apart. Now, that's a little bit more advanced, so we're not going to go into that in this tutorial. So the last thing I want to show you is the loft command. So I'm just going to reset this. Don't want to save it. We have the loft command. So in class, we kind of touched on this. So what we did in class was we made a water slide using a helix and a donut. So I'm going to show you that again. Going to make a helix. So the way you make this is you click and drag out, let go, drag up for the height, click, and then you have to drag again for the radius, click again. So it's a 3-click operation. So I'm going to right click to finish that. Now I'm going to make a donut. This is a 2-click operation. You have to click, drag out for the outer radius, let go, drag inward for the inner radius, and click again. So now we have the inner radius. Going to right click to end that create option. Now I'm going to select the helix here and go back to geometry, go to compound objects, we'll go to the loft. And right now we are actually on the path. So this helix is the path we want to follow. So we want to use get shape and click on the donut. So now the donut is extruded along this path here. So I'm just going to change this color again just because of my preference. I'm going to hit F4 to see my edge faces. So now let's take a look at what this is doing. So I'm going to move this off to the side here. I can actually go through here and actually change the size and shape of this. So if I want to go through here and change the radius here, you'll see it interactively changes with this on the extruded path as well. So that's really cool. Now let's say I want to change the way the path looks. Now in order to do this, you have to click on the loft object, hit the little plus sign, go to path, and then you'll see the helix pop up at the bottom. You click on helix, and now you can go in here and change the way the path looks. So if I want to change the height of this, I can change the height. I can go in here and change the number of turns, or something like that. I can change the base radius and change the height radius. So something like that. So now we want to go through and actually see what some of these parameters do in the lofting options. So to better show you this, I'm going to make a completely different loft operation. So I'm just going to reset this, note save it, and we're going to make some new pieces here. So when I go to shapes again, I'm going to go to line, and I'm just going to make a line straight across. So I'm going to click, let go, and I'm going to hold shift to lock it to one direction and click again. And it's going to make another point, and I'm going to right click to end it. So all I did was make a straight line. So now I want to make some different shapes that I want to put on this path. So the first shape I want to make is rectangle. So I'm going to put rectangle here. Next shape I want to make is a circle. Next shape I want to make is an n-gon. Now what an n-gon does is it actually takes in consideration the number of points that you want to have on the shape. So if I were to go to the modify and actually look at this, right now you see this n-gon has 6 sides. So if I want to change the number of sides here, I can increase it and it'll eventually turn into a circle. But I want to keep this at about 6 sides. So that's perfectly fine. So let's make this a little bit more visible, make this a brighter shape. So let's go yellow. Let's go with maybe white here, just so they're easier to see a little bit. So now with the path selected, I'm going to go to hole, just in case. Select this path here. And I want to go to compound objects, go to loft, and I want to get shape. Now, before I do this, I want to look at this little number here. This is path, and this is the percentage along the path. So when I get shape, it's going to put this across the entire path with the first shape. So now it takes on the shape of this square here, and it's going to make it pretty much a big rectangle. And next I want to do is I want to change the path number to about 30. I'm going to get shape. I want to select this circle. So now at 30%, it's going to change the shape right here. Now look what it did here. So it made a completely different shape. It merged these two shapes together. So I'm going to do this again. I'm going to go along 60. I'm going to go to get shape and select this n-gon here. So now you have 3 different shapes on one path. So this is a cool design. So let's go to edge faces. So hit F4 on the keyboard, see the geometry behind it. Now I don't like this color, so I'm going to change it to blue so it's easier to see. So now you can kind of see what that did. So I'm just going to move this loft up, and you can see we have the original shape line path right here. And this is our loft object. So now we want to go through here and we want to change some parameters in here. So I'm going to go to modify, and I'm going to click on loft here, and I'm going to go to shape. And now it's going to ask me to pick a shape. Right now everything is grayed out here. So what I want to do is I want to pick the shapes here, because we know that we have a square at the beginning, we have a circle right here, and then we have an N-gon right here. You'll see my cursor change when I get close to it. You'll see it's just a pointer right here, but when I get close to the shape, it's going to change to a crosshair. So this lets me know that there's something I can click on. So if I click on the first one, which is the square here, you'll see that this information pops up here. So now what I can do is I can go in here and I can kind of move this around and change the shape of this. Now right now my undo is not working, so I'm going to close out of Max and redo this. I'm going to reload 2012. Sometimes when you have Max open for too long, stuff stops working. I know in 2012 the undo goes away. Now let's verify that I can undo again. I'm just going to create a box, hit Control Z. Now I can undo. All right. I'm going to go to Edit and Fetch. And now I got this back again. So I'm going to do this operation one more time. I'm going to go to Compound Objects. I'm going to go to Loft. I'm going to go to Get Shape. Select the first shape. I'm going to change the path percent to 30. I'm going to get shape. I'm going to change this to 60. Get shape. Select this. Right click to end it. I'm just going to bring this loft up a little bit. Going to click on the plus sign. Going to go to shape. Going to click on the square again. And now I can freely move this around. And I can, well, I can't undo. There's actually something wrong with my install of 3ds Max 2012. So my undo is not quite working right now. But we're just going to push through this just so we can get through the tutorial. So let's see if I can redo this. Go to Loft, get shape. Repetition is good because it shows you exactly what you need to see over and over again. And you'll get it a little bit easier if you constantly see it done. 60, get shape. So back to this again. Bring it up. Go to Loft, shape. Select the shape you want to use. And I'm just going to hit these values down here. So let's say I want to move this off to the left, off to the right, move this off to the top, move it to the bottom, or I can just center this again, like so. So that's pretty much what these options do. And of course, you can change the percentage on the path here. So with this selected, I can change where this actually affects. With this shape, change where this affects. So something like that. So these are the loft options in there. Now you actually have some skin parameters in here. So if I turn on edge faces, I'm just going to make this blue so we can see it better. You can have the steps for the shapes, and this is going to increase or decrease the geometry. So this is horizontal, this is vertical, well, circular around. So I'm just going to leave it on what it was, 5 by 5. And then you have some options in here where you can change the way stuff is displayed. So this is the adaptiveness of it. Some of these you'll see changes, some of these you want. You never want to flip normals ever. You want to quadrify the size, you want to always leave that on. You never want to degrade anything. And these default options are pretty much what you want to keep. So the first option in here is scale for the deformers. So when you click on scale, it's going to give you this linear path here, and it has 2 points. So it has a point in the beginning and a point in the end. So let's say I want to scale this down a little bit. If I bring this down, you'll see that it scales this down to a smaller point. So now it kind of looks like a bullet head, less like a torpedo.
So that's scale. And you can toggle this on and off, the visibility of it. Next one is twist. So if I want to twist this around, you'll see that now this shape right here is starting to twist in a different direction. So as I move this higher and higher, it's going to twist this around in the front. So it's giving it a really cool effect. Now let's combine this twist with the scale. So now it gives me a twisted scaly effect here. So now if we look at this without edge faces, it made a really cool shape. So this kind of looks like a drill bit. So this is a cool way you can make a drill bit. So I'm going to turn scale and twist off. And next we're going to use teeter. Now teeter, it's not very useful. What this is going to do is it's going to skew your object. So as I increase this here, you can see my object is collapsing in on itself. And this is less than ideal. You definitely don't want it to do that. So with teeter, you gotta be careful with your values. So now if I see this, it kind of skewed the object here. And I really don't like to use teeter because I don't find it really useful. And next up we have bevel. Now what this does is this is like a more advanced version of scale. So now what this did was it kind of took the path and it kind of collapsed it and flipped it in on itself. So let's go the other direction. So that's a little bit better. So now this kind of looks like a cone a little bit. So if I were to go back to this, change scale, and instead of making this value scale down, I'm going to put it back where it was. If I change this value here, scale this, now it kind of looks like a, a wizard hat or a cone. So you can get some interesting shapes out of this. So the very last option I want to show you is fit. So to facilitate this, I'm going to open a completely different scene. Just going to reset this. All right. So this is a loft object that I made, and I made it in the shape of kind of like a car. And I'm going to show you how to get this result here. So I'm just going to delete that off here. So the first thing I do is I select this path I want to make. Go to compound objects, go to loft, going to get shape, and I'm going to select this box here. So now I kind of made this box the path along the path. Now I'm going to go to modify and I'm going to use fit. And I want to turn off make symmetrical because that's going to mess up everything we do next. And I want to display the y-axis because I want to put this shape here across the y direction. So I want to go this direction. So I'm going to change the color of this just so it's easier to see. And I want to go to get shape inside of here. Select this object. And now it kind of puts the shape of this up here. And now I want to tell it to generate path. And now it's going to even that out. So now you can kind of see what it did here. It kind of put this shape inside of here. So to see this, I'm going to zoom extend so you can see it. Now you can see the shape of the car in here. So this little outline here is actually in here. So next I want to use the x-axis. And I want to get shape again. And I'm just going to select this shape here. So now it drops this shape right into here. So now you can see it took the top axis here and it kind of made it to this. And what's cool about this is I can go in here and I can select one of the vertices here and I can completely change the shape. So if I want to move this out a little bit, you'll see it update right here. So this will kind of change the way your shape is made. If I want to go back to the other direction, the y-axis, I can change the car here. If I want to change the roof here, make this a little bit higher, I can. Change the way the windshield looks. Maybe kind of move the tires back a little bit. So this is what the fit command does. You can make some interesting shapes out of this. So that's it for this tutorial. If you have any questions, just email me back.